leave a message after the tone.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Working Vacation. I go by the name of Marvin Light.
I go by Hassan Shazaam.
It's your boy Mo.
And we want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Red Out Boxing. Red Out Boxing is a fully equipped, state-of-the-art boxing academy located right here in the heart of Toronto. It's an incredible boxing facility with boxing classes for all ages. If you're looking to get fit, stay healthy, and build some awesome self-defense skills, Red Out Boxing is the place to be. They are led by the best boxing and fitness instructors in all of Canada, located right here in the heart of Scarborough, Brampton, and Burlington, with classes that range from beginner level to advanced. Red Out Boxing offers something for everyone, formulated with the perfect combination of boxing, strength, and cardio conditioning intervals, designed to make you look good, feel good, and leave with more than just a great sweat. Check them out today on Instagram at Red Out Boxing, to discover your inner champion. All right, so we want to welcome our guest. He goes by the name of Marcus Medford Kerr. I'll actually let Hassan take the lead.
So this is one I've been excited about. Marcus, I've known you for a while now. So just let us know a little bit about yourself and kind of an intro of where you're at now and what do you do right now.
Actually, I was just writing your Christmas card, even though that might be a little TMI, but in September, we will have known each other for 10 years, which is wild. My name is Marcus Medford Kerr. I graduated from UTSC from a journalism specialization program. After graduating, I split my time between working as a recreation worker with the city. So I was doing admin stuff. I was teaching courses, like teaching sport courses to kids and like supervising sports and whatnot, and doing freelance journalism. So I was editing. I was doing kind of like an administrative assistant role where I was like cleaning up the website and answering emails and like taking surveys and using MailChimp. I also was a freelance writer for a magazine called The Edge, which is like a business and entrepreneurs magazine, lifestyle, travel, things like that, technology. Mm-hmm. New Canadian Media, that's where I was doing editing, some mentoring, and writing. I have a column. The column doesn't have a name yet. And also writing for BuyBlacks.com. And
for what? For BuyBlacks.com?
It is the #1 online magazine for Black Canadians. And it has been for a long time. And so a lot of the articles that I've written for them are feature articles. So I've like interviewed Marcy Ian. I've interviewed Elijah Balde, who's the figure skater, Marcy Ian being an MP. I've interviewed police officers about programs that are supposed to inform people of their rights and like build better relationships with the community. And starting last January, I started working at the CBC in a casual role as an editorial assistant. So that is
that's huge. Congrats.
Thank you. It was
congrats. I know you grinded for that for a long time.
Yeah, I did my internship there in 2017 at Q, which was so great. So after doing that, it was always kind of my goal to like get back into the building. So last January was when I was finally able to do that, doing editorial assistant work. So that's essentially helping the host in different ways with their scripts, like either working the teleprompter or like actually getting them the scripts, organizing them and stuff like that. And then tracking some information about the people that appear on the show who are not CBC reporters. So like if, for example, you were talking to a mayor or you were talking to something that talking to someone about something that happened in a community, like say a school shooting. Sorry, that's dark. But you would have the information about the person who is on there. Was this a man or a woman? Is this a person who studies school shootings, or is this someone who knows someone who was shot? And so logging the information and doing stuff like that. I also have been doing some work tracking COVID-19. So when there are new cases, new deaths, vaccinations, stuff like that. So the tracker that is on the CBC website, the data that is on there, I've been part of the team that is collecting that. And also writing. I recently started writing for a couple of the news broadcasts. So like when the anchors are reading scripts, usually that are either about a story or is kind of an introduction to a reporter's story. I have been doing some of that writing for about 2 months now. So those are all of the things that I have been doing, and I'm juggling I'm juggling most of those things now. So it's a lot, but I enjoy it. The hours are wild. Like tomorrow I start at 3:15 in the morning. So I don't love that, but the work is good, so I can't complain.
How did you get here to becoming a journalist? Like, what inspired you as a child? Because I know, Hassan, you're in journalism as well. You did journalism as well for school. So we got two journalists in the building, you know what I'm saying? But you're actually now practicing it with a large network like CBC. Like, what inspired you, even Hassan, what inspired you? What inspired both you guys to even get into journalism?
Uh,
You want
oh,
to, yeah, go first. I'll
okay,
go after
okay.
you. Yeah.
So I've always been interested in writing, like since the time I was 5. Like reading like Robert Munch and Dr. Seuss specifically. Like I really liked the stuff that they did, and it made me want to be a writer. And so like in elementary school, I would always I wrote short stories, and I would like do things like that, and it always kind of persisted. Like when I was around 12 years old, it started becoming more interested in poetry. And then when I got into high school, um, I I knew that I wanted to have a career in writing. I think the first thing in journalism that I actually wanted to do is I wanted to be so it's not exactly writing, it's more media, but I wanted to be like a radio show host, or like a much music VJ. Like that was what I wanted to be. So it was like journalism, but it was also art, and it was also music and entertainment, and that was really what I wanted to do. And when I got into UTSC, like UTSC was my fourth choice. I really did want to get into Ryerson's program or Western's program, because those are like broadcasts. Those are broad.
Yeah,
And
especially Ryerson with the way they marketed themselves
yeah, man, the
at that
arts
time.
program, that was the dream. That was
Mhm.
that was the dream. Um, so yeah, that's where the interest was. Like I think that I wanted to either be like a journalist of some kind, a teacher, or a lawyer. And I knew that like writing is something that I wanted to do, and I knew that I would be able to do it if I did journalism. And I knew that, or I guess I learned eventually that I could be like a print journalist where I'm writing stories, but I also could be a journalist where I would be a radio show host, or I could be a journalist and be a VJ, because like those are all different variations or iterations of journalism, I guess. And there was parts of them that I knew that I would enjoy and could do, and the same goes for being a lawyer, being a teacher. But I think I saw that there were more cons to those, especially when it came to law. I won't even get into that.
So my bad. So Hassan, that's actually dope, Marcus. So Hassan, what inspired you like to get into journalism as well?
For me, it was I'd always enjoyed stories from when I was like a really young kid. I started off with cartoons, and then it ended up becoming like small chapter books. Obviously, like starting with kind of Captain Underpants and stuff like that, and then it got bigger and it bigger chapter books and bigger chapter books. And next thing you know, I'm reading like 600 page, you know, books and things of that kind of like, books that you can really thump somebody's head over with. But that's yeah. So people would have their little jokes here and there, but um, that I could see myself from 12 years old. Like I wanted, like I knew I wanted something to do with the written word. I wanted I wanted to write for a living. I wanted to write. The first aspect of that was to write books, right? But obviously, the way you get into that through school, especially at the time when we were going into like 2011 for me, 2012 for you, Marcus. It was a little bit more convoluted. It was like a creative writing, what's it called, degree, and the way that's kind of looked at in a lot of uh, a lot of our households, I should say, is like it's not necessarily useful. So then I had to start thinking in a way in which where um, writing could be used as a tool where I could apply it in multiple different spaces. And I came to that answer in about 2011, 2012 to journalism as my answer, as a way to be able to apply writing in a multiple different areas. And at the time, a lot of outlets were coming out for, um, multimedia use, videography, a lot of things that I was into that combined a lot of things that um, sparked, I guess, that initial interest in childhood, whether it was cartoons back in the day, then it ended up becoming um, ended up becoming small chapter books and bigger chapter books, and then after that, ended up. I sometimes, if I had like a favorite, uh, I don't know, musician, artist, or whatever, like
Mm.
I'd sit down and sometimes I watch their interviews and I'd like try and pick it apart. How would I try and you know uh, set that up if it was me or something like that? I remember back in the day when I used to see like old Charlie Rose like interviews and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, the setup looks kind of cool, but I wouldn't ask those questions. I know,
Do you guys
like,
have any? Do you have any like favorite interviews of all time? Like I ask
oh,
both you guys.
d- uh,
Think about
uh,
it.
inside the actor studio, James Lipton, 2006 with Dave Chappelle after he came back from Africa. After he left the check from the Comedy Central check when he
Oh,
came
when he
back, and
said,
everybody was acting like he was crazy, and he was a lot skinnier at the time. He wasn't
and
buff yet.
he was like, oh, hey, you guys gotta watch that. Why he's like, you gotta watch that word crazy. It's real dismissive. I remember
Yeah,
that. I remember
I
that episode.
have that bookmarked in this Google in Chrome, like right now, like literally all time. One of my favorite interviews ever.
That was actually a crazy one. What about you, Marcus?
That's one of the things I really appreciate about you, Hassan. Just like I feel like your knowledge of these interviews and of these artists is like it's like encyclopedic. It's like Nardwar-esque. Like the way it's like they're just like, yeah, what's your favorite interview? This. It's like, oh snap. Um I know that there was an interview that the Breakfast Club did with J. Cole. I'm not sure which year it was. I know it's the one that he's wearing like a red
Might be 2013 or
maybe.
2014.
It was
Might
like
be.
it's a red jacket over a black
What's your
hoodie.
favorite moment? What was your favorite moment in it?
Um You know what? So for that, I'll give you my other favorite interview. My other favorite interview is an interview with Stephen Colbert, interviewing Russell Brand. I think this was in 2016, and um, what my favorite thing about the interview is, at one point, like Russell Brand is there to talk about like a movie that he's doing, and the interview strayed into just kind of like what is the mean like what is the meaning of what I do as an actor. Like the question was about like a performance, and it's like everything that I do is like part of a performance. Like I was able to do this thing because this thing that the character experiences something that I have experienced, and I'm able to convey it in a way that is so magical is because everyone relates to it, and it's like we all relate to it because it's part of some like spatial connection, like and getting into it like that. And he's like, and then he kind of flipped the question to Colbert, and then Colbert kind of instead of just kind of being like and laughing about it, just kind of like he himself like was answering, not quite to that level, but he was answering it on a like a philosophical way, and I just really enjoyed it. I think that Russell Brand, I've seen a couple of interviews that he's done with Stephen Colbert and with other people, and I think that he would be a really difficult person to interview because he does that so often, where he takes an answer and just kind of like expands it to deep philosophical things. And I think that he rants a lot, but I was really impressed with the question. I was impressed with the answer, and I was impressed with the way that Colbert responded to the answer that Russell Brand gave. And I just really, really enjoy Stephen Colbert. Like if I could meet 10 people, Stephen Colbert would probably be on that list.
Stephen Colbert is the man. What's the dream? So you come up, okay, you guys are inspired by a lot of creative writing, you know what I mean? But obviously you can take that a million different ways. And from what it seems, you guys took journalism because you wanted that multifaceted approach. You didn't want to be kind of stuck in a box, right? So who is a person in that realm that inspires you guys, and why? So I'll let Hassan go. So who's a person in that journalism realm that truly inspires you guys, and you're like, fam, that's the dream. That's the thing that I would love to do, and why?
Well, when I was younger, it was difficult to find a black journalist that I could relate to on that level. Mainly because on a lot of daytime television and stuff like locally over here in Toronto, like that's not the type of stuff that we were seeing.
Well, like white
Most of
guys?
the time they were the talent. Most of the time they were the talent, or they had some other artistic thing that they were there for to be interviewed for by typically, um, a white person or someone of another background. So I never saw enough aspects of that to be able to be like, you know what, like I want to be exactly that person. But I remember the first person I met that made me want to apply it, like made it realistic for me to like apply this need to pursue this field. Is Morgan Campbell. He used to work for Toronto Star. He was a sports columnist, and now I believe he works for the CB. He does stuff for the CBC, and I believe he has his own podcast that he does that is also sports related. When we were in Pathways to Education, if you remember, when we were in the program when we were younger.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Pathways is a program in the hood. It supports a lot of the kids in the hood, and they give like scholarships, if you complete the full program. And they give, like
about
bus
4
tickets
years.
and all that kind of bunch of different supports for kids in the hood. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember I made my interest kind of known about this is kind of the way I wanted to go. And I remember one day I believe it was for a mentoring session. They actually brought him through, and he came to the community, and we had a conversation. And after that, he always went out of his way to keep in touch and like remind me of like how things work at the time. Obviously things have like significantly changed, and more aspects of social media is present than it was in 2011. But just him coming through, taking his time out to speak with me. When I was in university, I remember he had a talk that he had over there where he went by my first year. We had a conversation then when we did our practical, when me and Marcus did our practical.
Well, you guys did your practical together? How is that experience?
So I'll just finish this point. When we did our practical at Pape and Mortimer, I believe, the Story Arts Center, it was Centennial College. So there's two locations. There's one in Morningside in Scarborough, and I believe that's for like paramedics and cops and things of that nature. And then the Story Arts Center was more like arts themed. So it was like journalism and multimedia, and there were guys designing video games. You remember on the first hall, Marcus, at the very end, the guys designing video games, like the lights were off all the time, and you didn't even know if they were there. But then the light will flash every once in a while. You're like, oh, there's somebody there. Okay.
Yeah, no, and you would see some of the stuff that they would be creating on those screens. Like I remember that old lady dancing to Happy. That's the one that
Oh,
sticks.
yeah. We would just see very random stuff. Like we'd spend like hours in the newsroom that they had over there. And but yeah, even then, you know, he was always available. I could always DM, you know, Mr. Campbell. I could always DM him. I could always ask him questions. And even though that's not exactly the route that I ended up taking, I always appreciated that being like something in my life that grounded me in you know, a realistic way to apply uh, whatever skills I got in this field. So
You
that
know,
would be the person I'd say.
that's actually awesome because one of the things you said, I think that's actually really important, was how every single interviewer you would see, like pretty much back in the day, the the talent was typically the person that was black, but you wouldn't really see the person who's given the interview, they're the interviewee, you know, the
They're the
interviewer.
interviewer. Yeah, the
They're the
interviewer would be the
interviewer, right?
subject. Mhm.
And you wouldn't really see many like black interviewers that were very known that you guys could be like, ah, that's possible for me. So Marcus, who is a person, maybe if you cannot answer that question, uh, how important is it to see a very known interviewer that looks like you, like growing up, to make it feel like it's possible for you? Like how important is that, if at all? Like
I
how important is basically representation in that field?
I think that it's really important. I think especially in that field, I think that representation in general is important because like you really do need to, well, it really does help to see people who look like you and who share characteristics with you, like in the fields that you want to get into, to let you know that you can do it, to let you know that you're welcome to do it. I think when it comes to media specifically, I think that representation is important. Like when it comes to the people that you see on screen, I think that it's important for that inspiration point for the kids who are growing up. But I also think that it's important for like for combating stereotypes, um, for kind of making diversity more than something that's just a fact. Like Canada is diverse, like in places, and that just is a, it just is a matter of fact. But I think that having people of color and people um who belong to different marginalized groups in a role like that is so prominent, and that is, I'm gonna say it's important. That's just a little journalist ego, but I think that it's important to have people in these spaces so that it normalizes, like the fact that there is someone who has who is a gay man who is reporting is fine. The fact that there is a woman with a hijab on is reporting is fine. And I think that
Hijab.
hijab, sorry.
No, hijab.
I think that those, like, that's part of the reason why representation is important. To answer your original question with people who inspired me, I think that I don't think that I had that. Like, I don't think that there is not the kind of journalism that I'm interested in. I did not become interested in it because of like a black anchor or a black reporter, or a black interviewer. Well, there was a black interviewer, but again, these were people who were more related to music journalists, like Sarah Taylor and Ryan Babel from Much Music, who were VJs, like Gemini and Mark Strong, specifically those two from Flow, and then all the other radio stations that they went to. And then I think going back to the other point that I was making about why I think having black anchors and black reporters matters is because I think that for a lot of like I know that I've talked to other black journalists who've said that that they were interested in music journalism not just because like that was a personal interest that they had, that but because those were the only journalists that they saw. The only journalists that they really saw were the radio show hosts, the like the people who were on BET or Much Music or Much More Music, and like those were the only journalism jobs that they
They
saw.
were exposed to.
Yeah.
They were exposed.
Exactly. Like the thought of being the 6 o'clock anchor in being Black was like not something that I think, it's not something that you would strive to because you saw it. You might strive to it just because you wanted to, but you wouldn't have been like, I want to be like that person, or at least growing up, I didn't know who that person was.
Yeah, like I guess I can make a distinction, like, and like you said, the ones that you always see in positions that, like, if BET was on a dial stock all the time, channel 49 for us, wherever it was for anyone
He
else
was
in the world.
popping. He
But
was
for us,
popping.
it was, it was on all the time. And I saw Terrence J, I saw Roxy, and I forget their names that came beforehand, the generation that came beforehand. Obviously,
AJ
after
Flo.
yes.
Yeah, well,
So in those instances, I would see it, but it was within a specific field, right? Whereas daytime news, like you were saying, and everything, like, for example, I'd had relatives who enjoyed the topics on for example, say The Agenda by Steve Paikin, but I couldn't necessarily relate to wanting to be him exactly. The way he was framing maybe his topics, or the way he was approaching it, I thought was interesting in some parts, but there wasn't a relatability factor there, as opposed to a connection that I felt in when I was watching those BET reruns,
Right.
or exactly 106 in Park, or whatever it was. This is pre-Shad Moss, obviously. Pre-Shad Moss, not Mr. 106 in Park. This is before that. After that, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of tuned out of BET a little bit, but yeah.
Yo, just question, this a little bit on the come up. You know what I'm saying? You guys are in university. You guys went to. Did you guys go to university together?
We did, yeah. U of T Scarborough.
All right, fam. I gotta hear.
One of the chants. So tempted.
What?
Say that again.
I'm so tempted to do one of the UTSC chants.
Oh
It's like,
no,
where
oh
are you?
man.
Wait. No, I'm not gonna do it.
Yeah.
No,
No,
we
he's
have to
talking
hear
about
it
the
now.
old. He's talking about the old Frost chant, like from back in
It's
the
too
day.
much. The thing
Okay.
is, there's too much energy required to do the chants, and once I get there, like I can't get back down to like.
You have to get there. Then you have to get there. You got to bring the energy, fam. You're on working vacation, fam.
Well,
You don't have to. I'm just teasing. All right, yo. University. Take us back to university. What was that experience like? I want to hear a notable story from one of you guys. One of the more interesting, wilder stories being a journalist. Because I know Hassan lived basically in the library. You know what I'm saying? But interesting stories that you guys, that was like awesome experiences that you guys had in journalism at university. It could have been together, it could be on your own, whatever. Stories you guys remember that were like notable. You just had a incredible time going through university, learning journalism. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. I remember my
It's
first.
okay if you don't have.
I remember my first stand. What I thought was like an interesting moment was so this wouldn't have been when we start. So we've had hours of conversations about this. We divided into like two parts. Our post-secondary experience as far as journalism goes. There's journalism theory, and then there's the reality of journalism. So the actual field of it. Right?
This is what I want to get into.
Journalism theory, a lot of it was speculative. There were essays. There were, a lot of them were essays. A lot of them were a lot of different types of, like, I guess, like structured things, where it would go from what we would do in that type of situation, right? What exactly would we do? How would we approach it? How would we interview somebody? Things like that. You wanna take it away, Marcus?
Yeah, I think I'm smiling just remembering some of these assignments. But I think the theory part, that mainly happens the first 2 years of the program. So it's like the program is billed as a 4.5 year to 5 year program, because you can graduate in 4.5 years, but it's a struggle, which I'll get into, I guess, later. But during the first 2 years when you're at U of T, the reason why it's kind of theory based is like you learn about the principles of journalism, like what ethics is, what objectivity is, why it's important to verify your sources and things like that. And so you take in this information, and the essays and things that you write are about that. So that's kind of the first year. And then the second year is kind of learning to understand like the different forms of journalism, like long journalism, multimedia journalism, digital journalism, stuff like that. And then when you get into third year is when you go to Centennial, and that is when things get real. One of my mom's friends worked on like she went to Centennial, or she was like on the board of the journalism program for Centennial, and which gave me, I want to disclose this, which gave me absolutely no benefits. I was not privileged in any way from knowing this person. Quite the opposite. But one of the things she said is like that is Centennial is what turns you into journalists. Like if you are a part of that program, like in her words, like that's when shit gets real. Like that's when you actually start going to do things. Like that's when you start going out into the field and interviewing people and like coming up with your own story ideas and chasing them. Because I think that when we in second year, there are a couple times when you do get assignments and you are chasing a story and you are interviewing someone, but those stories are what I now have learned to call issue stories. Like it's a story about an issue. So it's like a story about racism, or it's a story about gender, or it's a story about religion and media. So those were the kinds of things that we were working on when we were reporting. But in Centennial, like you start doing reporting about there was a car crash somewhere. What happened? There was like a string of businesses that there was a fire. Like interview the store owners, interview people who used to go there all the time. So like doing more reporting, more topic-based stories, I guess, or not topic-based, event-based stories. And it was stressful. I think to the point that Hassan was saying about like you would get an essay and it would be structured when it comes to sources getting back to you, like stories being available, being able to get something done on time. Those were not things that you could control at Centennial, and that was something that everyone had to adjust to. I think also being from U of T, and U of T like having the reputation that it has of being like the best university in Canada and like one of the top 20 like in the world and blah blah blah. Like so the people that go there are, in theory anyway, because we all have definitely met people who don't meet the expectation, but you do meet a lot of people who are very smart, who are very driven people, who are high achievers, and who would like skirt through all of the journalism courses and all of the other courses that they had to do for electives and minors. And then you get to Centennial and you get like slapped in the face by like 70s and C's and being told that your stories aren't good enough. So I think that was a huge adjustment. It was incredibly stressful. Like I jokingly call Centennial hell, because it was hell. And I also joked that it was kind of like jail, in the sense that everyone who is in there for a certain amount of time, and there's a lot of adversity. I mean, I've never been to jail, also another full disclosure. But like the camaraderie that you see in like movies, and like the fact that you bond with these people because you're all in this bad situation together, and you kind of have to use your prior experiences and you kind of get through a bad situation together. It made me feel like jail. But the thing is, like, I know that I would not be the same journalist I am had I not gone to Centennial. So
Marcus, what do you okay, this is probably that's awesome that you went through Centennial, you know what I mean, to really mold you to becoming a quality uh, journalist. You know what I'm saying? Because from what I found, like the question I wanted to kind of pose was, and Mohammed I know wants to get in on this
Mm.
is real journalism dead? You know, me and Mohammed, we're just a kind of layman. We're just regular people, you know. But it is real journalism dead because from what it seems like there's a lot of journalists who try to now create a story or even to some extent force a story as opposed to really telling what really happened. Like, or I don't know. Is there a difference between journalism and reporting? Like, what can you guys say about that? Like, is journalism dead? What do you guys think? Because it seems
Yeah.
like
So basically, the question that we're trying to ask is more so with the onset of like social media, the internet, blogs. I'm sure you're aware that anyone can have a platform. How
Mm.
has that affected journalism? Does it change the way you go about reporting things? Do you consider those people journalists as well? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like the just in the entire climate of how information is shared. Because for some people, news and reporting, they get it from memes, they get it from social media, Twitter, Instagram. How do you now compete, and how do you feel about the climate?
Um, I think I think how I'll start is to answer your initial question about like what's the difference between reporting and journalism. Um, I think that one of the ways to look at it is a reporting is the most factual version of journalism. Like it's the who, what, where, when, why, how. Like so reporting on um like a speech that a politician gives, it would be this politician said this thing at this place at this time. They were talking about this policy. Yeah, like that would be a piece of reporting. A piece of journalism would be the analysis of what the politician's saying. So like if this was like Doug Ford, for example, a piece of journalism about that speech could be about the election that's coming up later this year, or about Doug Ford's track record during the pandemic, or something like that. So that is more analysis. That is more opinion in some cases, or like making an argument. So so those are two different facets, I guess, of journalism. There's the reporting, like the strictly factual, this is what happened, and then there's the other stuff. I think that the other stuff is a lot of what um the bloggers will do, a lot of the things that you'll get hot takes on Twitter and through memes and through Reddit and stuff like that. um do I consider not every blogger is a journalist, but there are bloggers who do journalism with the rigor and then the principles that I was talking about earlier in a way that makes it's not necessarily legitimate, like because you're not with a network, you're not recognized by whatever governing body, or the CAJ, the Canadian Association of Journalists, I should say, or something like that. But you could still be credible. Like you could still be a valid source of information that is factually accurate. You could have opinions that are well informed, well sourced, good design, good pictures, and things like that. And that's credible if it's not legitimate in the ways that matter to some people. Um, so that's my opinion on that. Is journalism dead? It's not dead, but it's dying, and I'm not certain if it's like I don't think it's dying for good. I think it's dying kind of like in its current form. Like I think that journalism is changing, and part of the reason is because it has to. I think that part of the reason it has to change is because of social media, um, because of the role that opinion plays in the news, and in the way that people interpret the news. I think. in the way that news is consumed. Yeah, so I definitely think that it is changing. And I think that, and I please stop me, someone, if this is me just like giving more importance to journalism than it should have. But I think like the fact that the two of the Nobel Peace Prize winners were two journalists, and part of the reason that they were given the awards is because like the things that they were reporting on, or that the practice of journalism in general, and the situations that they were in, it was like it's a matter of democracy. It's like, see, like in some, like there's tabloid journalism, and there's a lot of journalism that is not vital in like the truest sense of the word, but there's things like that where people are writing like to give people freedom, where like journalists are killed because of the things that they write. Like I remember that was one of the things that one of my high school teachers told me when she found out that I was in journalism. It was like, just so you know, if you are going to go overseas, that journalists are some of the first people that get killed. So
there's some journalists that are martyrs like that. They literally just hop in the middle of like, it could be a war happening, fam, and they just want to get that story, you know, like how, because Muhammad, I remember Muhammad, you mentioned he could probably say it a lot better than me when it comes to like journalism versus, what do you call it, Muhammad, sensationalism?
Well, I think what he's referencing is that the barrier of entry in a lot of things through social media has become like really low.
Yeah.
And you know, the quick headline, the quick cliche, the quick clickbait title, filled with misinformation even at times, will draw more traffic to your site, more, and create more engagement than putting out actual facts or an actual substantial story to some degree.
Yeah.
And that's risen, and that's been rising more and more in a lot of different fields, but in journalism specifically, where we are taught, when we were taught like, you know, to be objective and these sort of things, like, I think that kind of, not only does that muddy the water, but I think in a way it kind of gives people, in my opinion, you could say from your perspective, but I think it gives people the incentive to just be like, you know what, this is easier. I'm just gonna go do this. Like this is getting so and so like more attention, more clicks, more whatever, you know. So why shouldn't I do that to further myself for whatever reason? Just take the easy way out, as opposed to a field that we talk about should have some ingrained level of morals and integrity and things of that nature when you're dealing with sources and stories and people, that things that could threaten people's lives if, you know, if it goes left, right?
Yeah.
I understand that completely, but the thing I was trying to refer to was just like, let's say you have a story, right, that happens, right? Why is it that you'll see, let's say, a place like Fox News? We'll get into the politics. I want you guys to get into like a place like Fox News will completely, I don't know if it's call it reporting or journalism, be way over on this side, and then CNN will be way over on that side. Like, how do you, like, that's very, it makes it tough, because when certain factual information happens, Muhammad spoke about this, like for example, like how COVID is reported. It's extremely polar, bro. Like even the fact that on social media, how there's literally like anytime you mention COVID, bro, on Instagram or any of these places, there's some kind of disclaimer that happens. So it's like, why is it so different when it comes to journalism when you have, let's say, the left and the right, and like these certain news networks obviously clearly pushing an agenda when they're telling these stories?
Can I start with that one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think one of the things that's important to realize, and I think I didn't truly realize it until maybe recently, is that when it comes to Fox, like and I don't watch Fox regularly. I don't know exactly how the programming works, but it's like the most prominent people on the network. So I think that's like Sean Hannity, Tucker Carlson, and then whoever the people are who are on in the morning. A lot. So, and I think again to what I was talking about earlier versus reporting versus journalism. A lot of the stuff that they're doing is not reporting. Like they are not telling you this is what happened. I'm gonna give you a clip of what someone said. It's like these are people giving their opinion. Like Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson specifically, they are giving their opinion and their analysis of whatever current events things are going on. So like that's part of the reason why the coverage is way over on one side, because
Is it their opinion though? Is it really their opinion, or
I think that I think that it, I think that I would definitely have to have a specific example. But yeah, no, I think it is definitely their opinion. I think that like the anniversary of January 6th just passed like a week ago. But that's one of the things, like when they're talking like, so when they're making claims that these people are patriots, these people are fighting for their country, these people aren't wrong for doing what they're doing, that's not reporting. Like that is not objectively factually accurate. That is imbuing opinion based on what happened. So that's part of the reason why their stuff is over there. Like because I don't watch Fox regularly, I don't know how some of the other stuff is. Like I know in the morning show, like people are talking about what happened. It's like, well, I think this person did this. It's like, again, that's someone's opinion. That's the reason why it's way over on that side. And I think to what we were talking about earlier about journalism dying, it's like, I think that part of the reason why things are all the way over on this, they're so polarized, is because that's what gets attention.
rating?
But that's what gets attention to the people that support that. Like it like they get fired up when they hear this, and people who don't agree with it hear that and they're like, oh my goodness, what? That's unbelievable. Like I read this headline, now I have to comment on it. That's more engagement.
And they give it clicks too, ironically, to see exactly. So whichever
It's
side of the
it's
fence you stand on.
polarizing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's polarizing.
I definitely think that some of it is like, this is truly how I feel about it, and I'm going to say it as such. And I do think that some of it is like catering to that base, or being some, having a headline that is clickbaity or sensationalized or somewhat misleading, even if the article isn't. Because I think that is also a defense that people will have, where or I've heard stories about that, where there's a headline and someone will read the headline and they're like, what? That's not what the story is. But when you read the story kind of explain, like the story and the headline don't match, but the headline has to grab attention, has to get people to the story, because there are so many different sources that you can get your news from.
So let's talk headlines. There was a really important one Hassan mentioned, I remember, from the Toronto Sun. Rest in peace to, it was Houdini, you know. Hassan, if you want to break that down, what happened?
Oh yeah, I believe the Toronto Sun. Well, generally, when we're talking about the two polar opposites of the way they report on a local level, Toronto Star and Toronto Sun. So the Toronto Sun, after he had passed away or was gunned down, the next day the article ended up saying, something to the effect of, who made Houdini disappear, on front page, right? Like right after it happened. So things like that. I mean, they're trying to do a play on words, but it's very tasteless. It's very senseless. Obviously, with the reality of what took
Disrespectful,
place,
bro. The
it's
man
very,
died.
very disrespectful. So, and they obviously have a particular slant on what they're approaching, and a political slant on how they're approaching things.
Marcus, you look like you're thinking something. What are you thinking, buddy? What are you thinking?
So I think what one of the things that I'm thinking about headlines is what you were initially talking about. I think that, and or with the Houdini headline specifically, I think that there are two things that are going on there. I think that one of them is what I was talking about earlier about it being clever and clickbaity, and something that will, like, it works as a headline. The play on words, it's short. There are people who, like, you see it and you understand what it is, but then also I think that the Toronto Sun is more of a tabloidy publication than the Toronto Star
Star.
is.
Yeah.
So that is a kind of headline that fits in with their kind of editorial style more than the Toronto Star would. So I think that that's part of it. I think that getting attention, having something that's snappy, I think that that is part of it. But I think that another part of it is like it's a representation issue. I think that if there was more black people on staff or a black person who was on that, they would see that and be like, absolutely, like you can't have that as the headline. And this doesn't have to be someone who is like a fan of hip hop. Like I think that
It's human. It's human.
yeah, I think that one of the examples that I think of is the H&M example from however many years ago with the black kid in, I think the monkey top, or I think there was some kind of
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
monkey.
No, I remember that. And it was like, how the hell did this even get
That
through?
see,
Like,
I think that the headline thing is kind of like that, where it's like, this to me is evidence that there's not any black people in any decision making position, or they don't have as much say as they should, because I don't think that there's any black person who would have seen that and not realize that that's an issue, whether or not they felt comfortable.
just to cut you off, my bad, Marcus. Just so people understand it, it was actually this black kid. I can't even share it, but it was this little black kid, and he had a green sweater on saying "coolest monkey in the jungle."
Yeah,
That's what it was.
and it's like there is no way. Like, I think when I first saw it, I didn't think that it was real. It's like, there's no way an international company like H&M would do this. It's like, you'd have to be an idiot to do this, or you'd have to have no black people who are in a decision making role to be able to see that and raise a flag with it. Or because I don't think that every single person who would have seen that, both the design and the picture for the design, or the Houdini headline, would have seen that and been like, I hate black people, I want this to go through. Like, and I'm creating this and okaying this because I don't like black people. I don't think that that's the case. I think that there probably are some people who along that line saw that was an issue, but because they feel that way, they're like, yeah, go ahead with this. But I think that
they thought it was a great idea. The white people working there, they're like, "Yeah, this idea is phenomenal. We got to run with this one, buddy."
I definitely think that there are some people who would have seen both who probably do. But I think it is more of an issue of, because there's not enough black people in the room, there's not, like, as these people are passing around this idea, no one's kind of looking over at Marcus, or looking over at Hassan and saying, it's like, yo, you know what? I think that would, like, I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't like that, or like, I wouldn't say that about them. And because I wouldn't say that about them, I won't say that about the black community more generally. Or like, I realize that this is something that would be offensive to them. Like, I wouldn't be comfortable saying this to their face. I probably shouldn't have this be my catalog photo. I probably shouldn't have this be my headline front page story.
That must have went through there's no way with HF. That must have went through like a couple of people, bro. Like, that
it must.
literally.
And I think with the Houdini issue, because this is, we're talking about journalism, I think that, if I'm being generous, I think that another one of the issues that we talked about, the fact that journalism is like dying and shrinking, and staff is getting shorter. Things need to be more immediate because of social media, because there are all these different sources that you can get your information from. It could
way faster.
It could have been a matter of someone wrote that headline because like, as a last resort, it's like, this thing needs to go out in like 3 minutes. It's like, there's no headline, or it's like the person doesn't have a headline, or someone along the chain just kind of changed it, because like, instead of this headline running by the author and some other, and like the author and editor and someone else. It's just going by like a headline writer. Like I know that at some places there are some people who only do headlines. So I think so that is a possibility. From what I know of the Sun, and I did a research project on the Sun and the way that they do reporting, so I understand how it is. So it could be a matter of that headline got through and it was as insensitive as it was, is because there's not a lot of people to see it and they were just trying to get it out. And it wasn't until it got out there like, oh, this is an issue. But that is me being generous because they're, yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, they took the path of least resistance. I get the feeling, even though I didn't do as much research on them as you, just on prior instances and previous actions and articles and things that they've done before. No, they knew. Yeah, nah, they knew for sure. But I did have a question actually, Mohammed. I don't know if you wanted to ask it because you hadn't said anything in a while, so you can chime in if you want. But okay, so we're just talking about not enough Black people being in the room, obviously, and some of these some of these places where decision making needs to take place, whether it's art spaces, whether it's journalism, specifically in this conversation with journalism. Um, a lot of times Black journalists get put in a position where they're, usually expected to be a universal voice for like all Black experiences, like all different kinds of Black experiences.
Mm.
So keeping that in mind, how have you gone about, and how do you still go about choosing what stories to pursue as a Black person? And have you ever been put in a position where you have been made to, been asked to speak on situations that you may have not had the lived experience for?
Yes, I actually have. I'm glad that you asked because there's two very specific instances that I wanted to talk about. One, when I was in university, I think this was in second year. I think there was a moment when the professor was asking the class about I think the way to talk about racialized people and just kind of like the words to use, like Black versus African American, African Canadian, things like that. And as they were asking about kind of like these are the things that they used to use and this is what they use, but how do you feel about it? And they asked me directly, and I happened to be sitting like at the very back center of the class. So as he's asking, he's looking right at me, and everyone at the class then turns and looking at me, and it's like, well, this is how I feel about it, but just because I'm the only Black person here, what I'm about to say doesn't speak for all Black people. Like I don't have that authority. I don't have that knowledge. Like the opinions that I have, like my opinion on what to call Black people versus my opinion on whether or not to use the N-word, it's like it's different. Like I know that it's different than other people's. So there was that instance. But then there was an instance that happened last year. I believe it was around the time of the Derek Chauvin trial wrapping up. And the host had an interview with, I believe it was an ex-football player who was assaulted by the police in Canada. And she was talking to him about like his experience and what all of that was like. And at the end of the show, she asked me how I thought the interview was. And the sense that I got from that was like, I was not being asked to speak on behalf of all Black people. I think that I was being asked to see, it's like, was this interview done like in a sensitive way? Like were the right things asked, kind of thing. So like that is in time where I thought that my experience as a Black person was I wasn't part of the decision making process in terms of what things were to be asked, and in my role I would not expect to be, but my opinions was relevant and was brought into the conversation, which was great. And so the other question that you asked about whether or not I don't think that I've ever been pushed into well, actually, no, that's not true. I was going to say that I hadn't been pushed into writing a specific story because I am Black. There have been times where, especially like in my freelancing, where people like there's a story about a program specifically for Black youth, or there was a study that I wrote about, I think last year, that looked at the experience, how Black people and other racialized people experience racism in Canada, and the editor was like, would you like to write about this? And that to me is like, that makes sense. It wasn't something like, here, you have to write about this because you are a Black person. I've been presented with the option because I am. The other times, and this is more so like at Centennial, in more formal newsroom type settings, there has been like an internal pressure that I have felt sometimes, like as a Black person, to bring up certain stories, because I fear that if I don't bring them up, that there is not another person on the team who will bring it up, or there's not another person on the team who will think that the story is interesting, or worth doing something on. So but that's kind of like an internal pressure, and I think that again goes to not enough Black people in the journalism space, like as a whole. Yeah, I am, and luckily I don't think I have been like labeled like an angry Black person, or seen as the person who always writes about race issues in any of the spaces that I've been in. So thankful for that, because that is something that some Black journalists who I have spoken to have told me that they have experienced, or that they have worried about.
Or people try to put them in a box.
Yeah, it's like yeah, and the thing is, so I've luckily haven't had an experience where like editors haven't said, it's like, oh, because you wrote about this one Black story, it's like I'm only going to assign you Black stories. It's like I will still get asked to write about things that don't have to do with the Black community, or I'm not asked to bring my perspective as a Black Canadian to everything that I write. There are some instances where I am asked to, and I think that a lot of the times I am asked to, it's relevant to, but it's not something that is kind of like thrust upon me.
So, and I'm glad. Thank you for answering that, because you and I both know we've had conversations for a long time about this. That a lot of stuff happens behind the scenes that never gets talked about, like this. That internal pressure, not necessarily overt. They know what not to say, but they know how to, for example, present certain things in the newsroom, and like bring certain things up in a nice suggestive nice general suggestive manner, just to be like, oh, there's this, there's that. You just put certain types of things in front of you for you to be like, maybe
And
I should give this a shot. Maybe.
And I think again to like when we were talking about representation, and like, or at least in my case, when it came to like the VJs and the radio hosts, it's like that is also not something that I personally have experienced, but it is something that I've talked to other Black and racialized journalists about, that that in their staff teams, or like by supervisors and whatnot, that people have kind of pushed them into like music and entertainment journalism. It's like, hey, why don't you, or it's like, if there's a story, it's like, hey, there's a concert coming, it's like, why don't you write about this? It's like, why are you asking me to write about it? Like if, for example, Masha Montano, you guys know Masha Montano, Soca? Okay,
Not so much.
so yeah, so if I ethnically am Trinidadian, or like if I was someone who immigrated, like David Thurton from the CBC, like he immigrated to Canada from Trinidad. If Masha Montano is coming to play, and this is a huge soca star, it makes sense to ask that person to do that. It's like, would you be interested in doing? But you don't assign them like you have to do this. And it's like, just because I have this connection doesn't necessarily mean that I want to. But I am personally interested. So I personally would take that story on. I would love to. But
Fair enough.
but the thing is, you don't want to be in a position where like that's seen as your role or your responsibility or the only thing that you can do. It's like, I'm only going to be asked to do concert reviews and interviews with artists. Like, I'm not going to be asked to interview the mayor or interview some athlete that's not a basketball athlete. I have to make that distinction. So yeah, I think that I know that I talked to one journalist who thought that the only journalism that they saw themselves doing was like one of those kid kind of programs like TVO Kids and CBC Kids, or music journalism. And because those were the only times they saw racialized people in those roles in journalism, or like some of the people that they would talk to and like ask for advice would say, hey, why don't you go do this? Even though that's not what they wanted to do. And that might not even be what their strengths are. Like, if, for example, someone was like, Marcus, you should write for you should do something for CBC Kids. It's like, I wouldn't necessarily be offended by that, because like I've worked with kids for years. If someone knew my CV and like my interests and whatnot, like that makes sense. But if someone's like, you should go into music journalism because you're Black and because I think that that's what you'd be good at, or that's what we're used to, well, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think he answered it perfectly. Because the reason I wanted to ask that question is because I noticed as of recently, especially in media, you have a lot of Black people gaining notoriety and opportunities and positions and roles as like producers or editors or writers, etc. And the stories or narratives that they're telling are typically from a more middle class perspective, but they're telling stories that don't necessarily come from their background. So that's kind of where the question was rooted in, and why I was asking, because I saw that like trend recently where it was like suburban Black people versus Black people that grew up in the hood. So that's kind of why I asked that question.
Mm-hmm. See, and I think that it is a different distinction, because it's a different it would be a different opinion regardless, but it's a different lived experience, and I think that would just have a different opinion that would come with it. But I think one of the things that's interesting about that like that idea is that white people don't have that. Like, I think that I think Chris Rock I think had a joke about it, and it's like he said that he wants Black people to be able to like be average. And it's like there should be enough Black people in a newsroom where you wouldn't have to worry about that. You wouldn't have to worry about someone who is like PK Subban's son. Like, I don't even know if he has a son, but like someone who's an NHL player's son. So this is a very wealthy Black person versus like someone who grew up in the hood. And it's like you wouldn't have to worry about having two different Black perspectives there, because it's just like it would be normal. And another thing to that is like
no, so hold on. So my bad. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying that it's not normal to have those two separate experiences. What I'm saying is the issue that I'm noticing is you're having someone who is affluent telling these stories, because let's be honest, typically what they associate Black stories with, what do they associate them with, in your opinion, Marcus? Just a quick question. Poverty, you know what I'm trying to say, like the general stereotypical, right? Exactly, narrative.
Mm-hmm.
The issue that I'm seeing is these narratives and the people that are telling them, there's a lack of due diligence done on a lot of these media conglomerates. They just get any Black person. Do you see what I'm saying now?
Yeah.
That person they don't have to have any background in this community.
Yeah.
They don't have to have any experience. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, let's just get a Black person. All right, you go, either it's regurgitate what we want you to say, or hey, just say whatever. And I think that's the problem.
Yeah, and you know what? I think so what I wanted to get what the other part of what I wanted to get to what you're saying is that like, and I think this kind of goes with the idea of like white being seen as the standard, or like even the idea of like white being like pure and like untouched and unblemished and objective. It's like, so what the point that you're making, like that's a very valid point. Like the fact that people will be like, just because someone's black doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be able to speak to this black issue because they don't actually have any experience with it. But the thing is, with white people being seen as like normal, it's like that same thing isn't happening. Like they're not like the idea of a politician's son writing a story versus someone who grew up in like a trailer park. I don't even know if we have trailer parks in Canada, but like, but that same kind of scrutiny isn't there, or like or it's not like when you see a story, you don't look at it through the lens of this might be coming from someone from one socioeconomic place versus someone coming from a lower place, because we're kind of fed everything as like white being seen as the objective. It's like that because those same variations exist with all different ethnicities, but you're not it. And it's not that it's not an issue. It's not brought up, and it's not talked about, and it's not looked at as the same way as it would be for white people, even though it should. So I agree with you that that the particular perspective of telling that story matters. But the same thing, it also matters with all these other groups, and I think that also deserves looking at. I don't know if that's the point that you were trying to make, but after hearing the point, that's just what it makes me think of. Because I think that, like, I know that there are certain stories about the black community that I am equipped to write about, and there are certain ones that I would not be able to. Like I know that.
Yeah, because the point that I'm just trying to get at is, I know everyone wants representation, but is it worth it if it's like tokenized? Do you get what I'm saying? Like we're just getting anyone just to speak on these issues. They don't necessarily have to be informed or actually have lived experiences. It's just enough that this person is black, so to speak, right? So that's kind of my concern with it. So like if you're a black person who grew up affluent, let's create spaces for you to tell stories that properly represent your upbringing and your experiences. If you're someone that grew up in these communities, let's get you to speak on those experiences. I think that's the issue that happens when it comes to black journalism, is they just get any single person and then just try to get them to kind of be the tokenized version or tokenized representation of that community.
I think that there is some value and benefit to having that. I think when you were talking about earlier, it's like if you're being spoon fed like who to talk to, what to say, then I think that that's meaningless. But if you're going to just get a black person, specifically for this example, like if you're going to get a black person to write about a black issue, even if they might not be connected to it by a class, I think that that black journalist is likely in some senses to, like, I think that there are some aspects of the story that they would be able to handle better than a white journalist, even though there is that class difference. I think that with that, I think that audiences need to recognize that that one that like journalism as a field is limited, and that you won't necessarily be able to have the perfect person be assigned to the perfect story based on their work experience and their lived experience. So I think that audiences kind of have to accept that, and kind of accept that, like, that it might just not be possible to get to get that exact thing. I think that I think that it does matter, and there is value in having people who can speak to the lived experience, even if it's only a little bit. I think that trying to play that off as like, it's like, hey, we have this black expert and this person is not actually a black expert, I think that is an issue.
So that's kind of my concern, why I think it's dangerous when people say, well, you know what, like we can't always find the perfect candidate. I think it does matter, because some of these stories, the the content that you're discussing is so heavily linked to who these people are, their background, and where they're from. If you're not getting the right people to tell these stories, uh, we understand the power of media. This can skew how people are looked at.
I think to the point that I was talking about earlier with the reporting versus the journalism versus the analysis, I think that to the point of like just having like, I think that for the reporting, it'd be great if you could have someone who is like just a Black person in general to do that. But if you can't find someone to do the reporting of this person said this thing, then like I think that you can have like, I think that something that speaks specifically to the experience in the hood, which is not an experience that I have. I think that I would be able to sufficiently write about like factually this is what happened, do the reporting, but the analysis part, I agree with you that I think that I am not the best person to do this. And I think that for the analysis, and I think that for a lot of the social kind of issues, the analysis piece I think should come from someone who has that lived experience. Like if it's an LGBTQ issue, if it's an indigenous issue, I think that the analysis, like the why this thing matters, the those things, I think that having that analysis from someone who who knows it from a lived experience, or really knows who the best people to talk to, how to write about that story um, with compassion and cultural sensitivity. I think that that is necessary, because like as you're saying, like this is media is one of the main ways that people form ideas and opinions about themselves and about our society.
Others, exactly, yeah.
Even
Having,
subconsciously.
yeah, and I think having that is huge. I think that and it I think that there are probably like some networks and instances of where people are being handpicked like for the exact like nefarious reasons that you mentioned. It's like, I'm going to pick this Black person because like specifically because I know that they don't speak to any of these experiences, but I can put them up as a pedestal as our Black correspondent and have that person
Exactly,
speak for the
yeah.
community, even though they are against the community like ideologically, and like it is well known. I think that because I definitely think that because I know Hassan and I have spoken about it more like on an activist level, that people will kind of use like the Black Lives Matter as like a career building thing, or people will it's like, or going to a journalist, people will
Don't get me on my hot started.
No, Mohammed talks about that a lot. He talks about that a lot. Grifting is a huge thing in the working vacation
Biggest finesse
podcast.
out here right now. Yeah, biggest finesse.
but oh shoot, what was I gonna say?
Moha-
But I think
Using Black Lives Matter as like a job
To build your
like
career, to
building
build your
yourself up.
career.
I think that I think that there probably are some people who are recognizing like this is an opportunity for me to work on stories that are prominent, for me to get in a role that is going to give me some more say than the average person, like one that's going to be looked at because of all the analysis and things that have happened over the last 2 years, I guess. But I do also think that there probably are some Black people who are put into these positions who have like no intention of being the mouthpiece, and who are maybe not even brought on as a mouthpiece like by executives and whatnot, but because they are because you are the only Black person, you become the mouthpiece, like regardless of like, and so I because I think that the thing that you're talking about is like, it definitely is a problem, but I think that if there's only one Black person on staff, it's like this Black person is now the mouthpiece, but it's like, why am I the mouthpiece? Because I'm Black, not for any of the other reasons that I don't want to say would qualify you, like if you don't have X experience, you're not actually Black, but it's like, but
But doesn't that show to like a hiring practice and like generally like a hiring standard issue that needs to change going forward? Like, doesn't that show that that's what in many ways what the missing link is? Or like you were saying, enough Black people in decision making roles who understand that this is valuable. Picking from this perspective is valuable. It's necessary and it's needed.
And so going back to what I was talking about like sometimes feeling pressured to take on a Black story. It's like if I'm not the only, if there are 4 other Black people on this team of like 20, like actually that's a pretty good number. A quarter of the people being Black, that'd be pretty damn phenomenal. I mean, like that's the thing. Like me saying a quarter, I'm like, that's phenomenal. That just shows where we are. But it's like, but if there are 5 of us on this team of 20, I don't have the same pressure to bring up this story because I know that someone else might. Like, I don't feel like I'm the only one who will bring up this story.
You don't feel like you're the token Black guy on the crew.
Yeah, exactly. I think that also would be a solution to not having people who are bad representatives for the community put in the role as representative for the community, or like I think that it's a two-way thing. I think
things that are easily solvable if you have the right communication standards in place, in my opinion.
Man, I think that part of what the issue is just like I think the opinions of like what is seen as acceptable. Like I think that because
and that's my issue, bro, because the people that decide what's acceptable are not Black. You see what I'm saying? You have people that are not Black that are telling you, okay, well, this is an acceptable Black. We'll let him speak now.
I get what you're saying. You're talking about that.
Like CBC, like I don't know if you're familiar with Louis Farrakhan, fam. They would never let you interview him. They would never let you interview him or Toronto guy Cody.
Yeah, probably not. Well, I mean,
Why did you say Toronto guy Cody? This guy.
Well, I say probably not, just because like I know that there are. I think
they're not letting guys from the Nation of Islam up there. They're not letting Toronto guy Cody in the CIBC building.
You know, and I think that because I think that there are some people where it's like they wouldn't get a chance to be on because it's like because of the role as the public broadcaster. It's like there are some views that I would imagine are like it's too far in one direction to have honor, to give space, or the people specifically, or it's like this person is too volatile to have on. It's like this person could say something that would make us a foul with the CRTC, and it's like, yeah, I'm as the public broadcaster, like I'm not going to take that risk. Let someone else with commercial interests do that. Even though I think that
that's my point, dude. You don't think that's an issue with journalism then? Because look what you just said. Like, Marcus, watch this. You don't think that's going to eventually undercut mainstream media? You don't think people are going to get tired of these, like, PC talking points? Because I'm noticing it now. Like, you're seeing a lot of these media platforms and people who have opinions popping up with platforms on YouTube in particular and other spaces. And they're gaining a lot of traction and following. Look at Joe Rogan.
The podcast.
He has one of the biggest podcasts in the world, and he doesn't tread that PC line. He wouldn't be allowed to do
but and again,
half the stuff he does on his podcast, he wouldn't be allowed to do.
Joe Rogan and like I know this isn't the exact point, but the thing is, Joe Rogan's role and responsibility versus the CBC's role and responsibility are very different, and the reason why people would tune into them is very different. Like Joe Rogan can have people as extreme as he wants on either and any side because it's for, not even because it's for an audience. Like I think Joe Rogan has got so big where it's like I'll have whoever I want on here and I will say whatever I want and they will say whatever I want, and there will be people here regardless, like just because. I think that I do think the point that you were making about having like having either the same revolving group of people or like not having enough diversity in the people that are on. It kind of dilutes the conversation because you're not hearing everything that's out here, or you're not hearing everything that's out there, or you're not hearing from enough different people. But I think that and not even just with the CBC, I think that when it comes to like responsible journalism, like I think that and I think, again, going to what we were talking about with the reporting versus the journalism, like the Sean Hannity versus the reporting that Fox does. So there are some shows like the show that I write for. It's like it's a national news show. Like it is supposed to be like relatively like objective. Like it would not have someone who has the like extreme views on there, because like that's not the place for it. But there are certain shows where it's like, this is an opinion show, like this is a talk show, where you could have someone who has more extreme views on that, because like that's what it's about. Like you're presenting
Hold on,
that.
Marcus, what do you consider extreme views?
Like, for example, the Proud Boys. I would not have like a member of the Proud Boys, or like the president of the Proud Boys, is probably like, you're not going to give that person national airtime. If there is someone who is at a Proud Boy rally, you would talk to that person. Why are you here? What, like, and so you're getting that viewpoint. You're not getting it from the most extreme version of it. Like, you wouldn't have that interview. I don't think that interview would ever air on prime time, but someone who's in the crowd would be. But if there's going to be an opinion show, on the opinion show, you might have the leader of the Proud Boys on there. Again, I don't think the CBC would, because of national broadcast and responsibility and whatnot. But there is a space in journalism for that. And I think that what one of the issues is with being able to get information from so many different sources, and the fact that anyone can produce things, is what will happen is that someone with those extreme views will be on a show with someone who has those same extreme views, and it becomes what are they, like an information silo or an echo chamber. And it's like, so when you hear this, you think that everyone thinks this extremely, even though what you're actually seeing is a very catered and specific perspective.
I think the concern that I have though with mainstream media, and it's kind of the core of like where this question is coming from, is the way things are set up. I think people eventually are gonna like begin to revolt against it, and you're starting to see it now. Like, to me, Trump is a perfect example of that. He used the perfect like moniker or phrasing for his following, the silent majority. There was a large group of people that were in America that were very upset with the fact that Obama had become president, that Democrats had gained control, that you had someone who was black that was in control, and he fed into that. He was able to win an election, and as we saw, a lot of other things transpired during that time. The way media is set up, there's like a script. Like, a lot of this stuff is becoming formulaic, and I think listeners want more. Whether you call it extreme or not, they want the reality. They want to hear the hard truths, and
they want to hear both sides, not just that one.
Yeah. But even another layer. My issue is the hard truths that they do allow are usually filtered through a specific sphere, because he said, "Oh, this is extreme. We find this extreme." To who? Who's it extreme to? It might be bad, but who's to say this is extreme? Why can't this be discussed on television? I understand obviously the sponsors and the financial implications, but I'm just saying, as like someone who is speaking about journalism as a whole, you don't think that's going to be a concern down the line for these mainstream entities, especially with the way the internet 3.0 and everything's headed? That why am I going to these platforms when I can go somewhere else and I can get a more honest and more genuine and more upfront and direct answer?
And I think that might lend itself even to the what you were talking about with a lot of the established media outlets having like paywalls, and you were talking about, like, to me privately, where you know, it's getting a lot harder to access some of their sites and things like that. And people are, it is, information is easier to disseminate now. It's easier to find other sources for things and whatever it is that you're into and that you're looking for. So yeah, whatever your thoughts are on that, whatever you can speak to.
I think that paywalls, I think that
because it is one contributing factor that's going to turn people away from the outlet.
What's a paywall for a guy like me who has no clue what it is?
A paywall is when a link, like normally an article or a video, is like when you click on the link, you're not able to access the content unless you are a subscriber or like you're a paid member or something.
I know what that is. Yeah. Toronto
So,
Star has that. All those guys have that. Yeah.
It is
because dude, they're not selling newspapers and magazines like they used to. So
subscription.
For them, just having a blog that's like free and having ads posted isn't enough. They need like a subscription model as well to kind of sustain that. Yeah, go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, I know.
I know what it is. I wasn't familiar with the term.
And I think that one of the I think that paywalls is one of the things that drives people, and that's the thing, like driving people to blogs and like independent websites, like that in and of itself is not an issue. The issue is like when you're not getting, like when you're getting information that like feeds into the echo chamber, and that's for a very specific purpose. Again, like if you're, and this is no slight to Joe Rogan, but it's like if you're only getting your information from Joe Rogan, like Joe Rogan doesn't have the same obligation, responsibilities, or like role to give facts in the same way that a news organization would. But if the information that you're looking for, or the only perspectives you're able to hear, are on Joe Rogan's podcast, and that's the only place that you go, I think that, and I think to your point of people wanting more, and wanting things that are like less filtered, or that are more analytical, and like get at the nitty gritty in the issue, as opposed to just the
just honest, man, just honest.
But no, I think I don't. Yeah. I would disagree that.
But everybody's version of honest.
Yeah, because I think
who it is.
I think that
no, but honest is honest, fam. Like whatever your perspective is, speak your honest to God truth. What your perspective is. I think that's the issue that we're caught up on. I think mainstream media tries to become too much of a moral police. This is wrong. You shouldn't say this. This ism and this ism, and oh my God, why are you saying this?
There's a difference between like truth and honesty. Like those aren't the same things. Like being,
sometimes the truth hurts, man. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but
there are people going out of their way to hurt for the sole purpose of getting a reaction out of you, not to put out a fact.
No, but I think
you can discern that. You can discern trolling.
But it's so widespread, and it's in every market.
I think,
but it already happens in mainstream media. It's even worse, I would say, because people are trolling things that aren't even true. You got someone like Candace Owens who's writing books and becoming a bestseller, and she's literally just lying out her mouth. She's just making stuff up just to sell books.
Yeah, let Marcus finish. The difference between truth and honesty.
Because I
agree with Mahad.
No, because I think that the difference between, like, I think that opinion is honest, but opinion is not true. Like opinion is honest because like this is honestly how I feel. These are my experience, and that is honest, and it is true. Like it is true that this thing happened to me, but how I feel about it, and like honestly how I feel about it, or honestly how this experience happened, like that isn't always the truth. And I like that isn't always the objective truth. Like this is factually what happened. This is what it happened. What happened. What this is not what happens means. And I think that is like it's just a different kind of space, because I don't think that, like, I think, like, going back to the Proud Boy thing, it's like the it's like, yeah, they're on some platforms, like, I don't want you to be, honest. I don't want you to be fully honest on here. I don't want you to come on here and say why you hate people of why you hate these kind of people, or what you would want to do to them, even though that is honestly how
But isn't that
you
the
feel. If you
core of
say that,
journalism, though?
that is
Isn't that the core
true.
of
But
journalism?
the thing is, it's like, knowing the specifics of what someone would do to you, like, how 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 beneficial is having that information. Like, you can, knowing what the beliefs of the group are, what they've done, what the ideologies are, like, to whatever degree. It's like, there's truth in that, and there is value in knowing that. But knowing what, like, someone wants to do with a knife to you in some place, like that is being honest, yes, absolutely. But it's more, I would say that that's more harmful. Like, if you're someone who is a potential target of this, someone who has been threatened by this, it's like, i am now I am now worried and anxious, more so than I would be with knowing this is the ideology, this is where the group is, and stuff like that. So, and I think that would be an example where, like, yeah, I think that there should be a space, like, there should be a space for those kind of people to discuss and have those kind of conversations, because if they're not having those kind of conversations anywhere, like, it just boils and it gets January 6th levels. But I don't think that is something that should be, like, because I think and because when you were saying earlier, like, who gets to decide what is and what isn't extreme, like, I know that I've, like, when there's been coverage of things, it's like, if there is any video of something that shows someone, like, dying, or like a dead body, it's like, that won't get shown. Like, if there's someone getting hit by a vehicle, that won't get shown. Yeah, I don't know, like, there because I think those are ones where I know it's like, if there's someone, like, because you can be, if there's someone who's against, um carbon taxes, and there's someone who is, skeptical at the role that humans played in climate change, that person will get an interview. But if there's someone who says climate change is not happening, that's not a thing, that person's not going to get an interview, because what you're saying is like, not it's not just contestable. Like, things that are contestable can be contested, those can be talked about. But if something is just factually inaccurate, it's like, we're not gonna give this space to talk about something that is like Holocaust deniers. It's like, we're not gonna give this space for someone to talk about this thing that happened, that we all know happened, and we've all agreed is an atrocious thing. um those are the examples that come to mind. um
So given, yeah, everything like you've discussed, and obviously like the limits, the stretches of the profession, I know like a lot of things in the journalism space obviously have been changing. We've discussed that. Um, One of the last things I did want to ask you was, with the amount of opportunities that are opening up through social media, obviously, like Brandon Gunn is leaving his show, leaving CP24 and starting his own thing, opportunities that may even be available for other international journalists of color, whether they're Black or fit another denomination or another group. Um, Talk about maybe what some of those opportunities are. And I know you've been looking into this a little bit more deeper as of late.
yeah.
So I know you wanted to mention that.
um I think that Brandon Gomez is, I think, a really interesting case, because, like, when he was on CP24, he was very, like, he was one of the prominent reporters. Like, I think that he got a decent amount of big stories, and I think that, like, he was a fairly regular, person. Like, he appeared fairly regularly. I think that, him leaving and starting his own show, from what I gather, the team is like, it's a relatively small team. Like I think there's probably like maybe 6 people on there. I think that what it goes to show, and what we've been talking about the place that multimedia is playing in journalism, the role of like social media and marketing. I think that his success goes to show that like there are alternative ways to do things. I think like in the year that he had his show, he interviewed the prime minister twice, like in a pandemic year. Like it's not like the prime minister didn't have things to do. It didn't have things going on. So it's like that is like, and the prime minister, for example, like didn't speak to Rebel Media. Like Rebel Media asked him a question at a debate, and he's like, "I'm not talking to you." But he spoke to Brandon Gomez twice. So I think for young journalists out there, and that's the thing. Another thing I think with the success of that show, and I think with a show like that, I'm sure that not everyone who was on that team is a journalist. Like I don't think that everyone on that team probably went to J school or is like all that interested in, like who don't have the same interest and background in journalism that Hassan and I have. So I think that like if you can understand how to use your skills, especially like those multimedia skills, to kind of fit on a team or project, I think that can be great for you. The other thing is freelancing. I was a freelancer up until like a couple weeks ago when I signed my contract. And I think being a freelancer, it's not great for stability reasons, because like you don't know how many stories are going to get, how many stories will get accepted, how long it'll take to actually write your stories, how much you'll be paid for stories, because like some publications, for example, pay per word versus some pay just a flat rate. But one of the benefits of freelancing is like you can take one idea and pitch it to multiple publications. You can take one idea and look at different aspects of it. Like if you wanted to talk, so The Weeknd just had a new album. You could talk about, like you could pitch to one place, like I'm going to write about how The Weeknd went from sounding like D'Angelo to sounding like Daft Punk. Like I don't know, that's just an example. But you could also talk about, you could have another article about just the album coming out and pitch that to someone else, or you could try to like talk to one of the producers on the team and be like, this is how the sound came out. So you're able to kind of take one story and like you can take one story and get 3 stories out of it. So that's a possibility that you have when you're a freelancer, or depending on where you freelance. You can get some opportunities to do stories that you're personally really interested in, which I find great. Like I think I probably pitch around like 60 to like 65% of the stories that I end up writing. So like having that control over what I'm writing, but also like being personally invested in it, is also something to look at. Yeah, I think, and I think to what was mentioned earlier, it's like social media is huge. Like there's a lot of job postings that are shared, like calls for stories, and things like that. So looking into those things helps. And then also just talking to people, like I've told several people that like who you know is almost as valuable as what you know. Like I know that the position that I am in, like just in life in general, is partially aided by the people that I know and who have been able to vouch for me. Like you obviously need to have the skills and ability once you get into those spaces to do whatever it is that's required of you, but having someone who's willing to take a chance on you, or to like train you, mentor you for you to be in that position, is priceless. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna leave it out at that. Marcus, we're slicing, dicing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, fam, we really appreciate you for being on the Working Vacation podcast. First of all, we want to thank every single person that tunes into the Working Vacation podcast. We really, really appreciate you guys. You know what I'm saying? Show a friend, tell a friend to tell a friend. Like, comment, subscribe. You guys already know what time it is. I go by the name of Marvin Light.
I go by the name Hassan Shazaam.
It's your boy Mo.
And it's the Working Vacation podcast, baby. And we got our amazing guest, my man, Marcus Medford Kerr. Gang, we out. All right.
Thank you.